Alright people, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to lecture number 5 from Polity in this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay 2026. As you all know, that through this lecture series we cover or we revise the entire syllabus for Prelims 2026. That means we'll be covering current affairs, subject-wise, and we'll also cover the associated static topics as well, because we all know that static topics that have some connection with current affairs have a higher chance of featuring in your prelims examination. Therefore, we will revise everything. It is very important for you guys to begin your revision now because prelims is not that far off. So begin this revision through this lecture series. This lecture series would be definitely useful for you. In fact, I shouldn't say useful. Your chances of crossing prelims would dramatically increase if you follow these 4 steps. Step number 1, watch the lecture on time every day at 9 p.m. Step number 2, along with the lecture, we'll be giving you some notes. Those notes would contain some extra information as well. So memorize those notes. Then along with this, step number 3 is that we have enrolled you in our WhatsApp groups, right? So ask your doubts in those WhatsApp groups. Those WhatsApp groups are specifically created for that purpose alone, so that you have 24/7 access to our teachers. And step number 4, along with this lecture series, you'll be getting access to our test series, specifically designed for Prelims 2026. Make sure you give the tests on time. This test series contains an exhaustive list of tests. Give the tests on time. Follow these 4 steps. As far as step number 1 is concerned, the lectures would drop on YouTube. But for step number 2, that is notes for WhatsApp access and for the access to test series, you would have to register on our app or on our website. The links to both are given in the comment section below. You just have to click on these links and register for this lecture series, and let's begin your revision. All right then. That would be the introduction part. Let's straight away dive into the lecture. And our today's topic of discussion is fundamental duties. And the reason why we are discussing fundamental duties is because they were in the news last year, specifically the month of September 2025. Because a public interest litigation was filed in the Honorable Supreme Court saying that the judiciary should direct the parliament or state legislature to enact laws to implement fundamental duties. You must have studied this, that fundamental duties, unlike fundamental rights, are non-justiciable. This PIL, this petitioner, argued that fundamental duties should be justiciable. There should be punishment for citizens who are not performing their fundamental duties. That is why we need to understand the concept of fundamental duties, certain facts related to fundamental duties, and in the end, we'll talk about this case, this PIL, this public interest litigation that was filed in the Honorable Supreme Court. All right, so these are the things that we will cover in today's lecture. All of these things are related to fundamental duties. So let's straight away jump into the lecture. Okay, so Polity lecture number 5, fundamental duties. Now, as far as fundamental duties are concerned, you should know this, that they were not written in the original constitution. The original constitution only had fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. These fundamental duties were introduced into the Constitution in 1976 through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act because it was felt that, well, citizens shouldn't only enjoy rights. Citizen is not a consumer, he's also a participant in the democracy. For making Indian citizens participate in this democracy, you need to have duties as well, along with rights. So if you only have rights, you are just a basic empty consumer. But we want to make India a participatory democracy. This concept is important. In participatory democracy, well, citizens have certain obligations as well. So to make India a participatory democracy, to make our citizenry, well, participate in India, okay, in Indian polity, basically to construct India, basically speaking, well, you want that citizens should perform their due role. And for that reason, fundamental duties were introduced. So let's talk about the origin of this concept of fundamental duties. Basically, it was inspired from Soviet Union's constitution. So the origin story. So fundamental duties entered the Indian Constitution via 42nd Amendment Act. We have discussed this, of 1976, adding Part 4A. So remember that fundamental rights are in Part 3, DPSPs are in Part 4, and in the original constitution, Okay, in the original constitution, just after part 4, there was part 5, and part 5 dealt with president, union executive. So in the original constitution, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts, but fundamental duties were created later. Therefore, a special part was created called part 4A to insert fundamental duties, chapter on fundamental duties. Okay, so this was part 4A. And in the original fundamental duties chapter, there were 10 duties for citizens. And a special article called Article 51A was inserted in this part 4A. So through 42nd Amendment Act, you inserted part 4A. And in part 4A, there was Article 51A. And in Article 51A, there were a set of 10 duties. Okay. The concept drew from USSR Constitution and earlier ideas like 1961 K. Santhanam Committee. So USSR Constitution had this concept of fundamental duties, and in 1961, a specific committee called K. Santhanam Committee, remember the name, also advised the government to create fundamental duties. Okay, duties to foster discipline and unity in the country. Now, this recommendation by K. Santhanam fell on deaf ears back then in 1961, because back then people felt that we don't need, the experts, the politicians felt that we don't need fundamental duties. But in 1970s, it was a turbulent decade. Okay, there were so many protests and many things were happening, and Indira Gandhi government was in the power. So Indira Gandhi government felt that, well, citizens need to perform their duties as well. So this concept of fundamental duties, which was advised in K. Santhanam's time, was revived again, and Indira Gandhi government formed Swaran Singh Committee, Sardar Swaran Singh Committee, to recommend on fundamental duties. So this Sardar Swaran Singh Committee basically gave its recommendations in 1976, and they gave a set of fundamental duties. Most of those fundamental duties were accepted by the ruling government of the day, and 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act was passed to introduce this chapter. So Swaran Singh Committee, formed in 1976 during the emergency, Indira Gandhi's emergency, recommended a dedicated chapter emphasizing citizens' responsibilities along with rights. Okay, now remember, in 42nd Amendment, there were 10 duties, but today we have 11 duties. The 11th duty was added via 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002. So remember this, the original one had 10 duties, the current constitution has 11 duties, and the 11th duty was added via 86th Constitutional Amendment Act. The 11th duty was to provide education to children aged 6 to 14 years, aligning with Article 21A, right to education. Basically, well, this was the thing. Okay, so yeah, we'll talk about all the duties. So these are a few facts that you need to know. First of all, you need to remember that the inspiration for fundamental duties was USSR Constitution, though many other constitutions have fundamental duties. We'll talk about them. And K. Santhanam Committee. And the final recommendation was given by Swaran Singh Committee. Based on this committee's recommendation, well, these duties were added. Okay. Now, these are the 11 fundamental duties. So remember, it is Article 51A. Okay. And Article 51A has 11 clauses. Each clause is named ABCD. Okay. So 51A, clause A has, it is the duty of every citizen to abide by the Constitution, respect its ideals, institutions, national flag. Then B is cherish noble ideals of the freedom struggle. C is uphold sovereignty, unity, integrity of India. D is defend the country and render national service. E is harmony and brotherhood and renounce practices derogatory to women. F, value and preserve composite rich culture of India. And G, H, I, J, K. Now, the thing is, I said G, H, I, J, K. Basically, I'm skipping these fundamental duties, but you can't skip these fundamental duties because in previous prelims papers, well, questions have been asked whether this is a fundamental duty or this is part of preamble or this is part of DPSP or it is part of fundamental rights. So they wrote cherish noble ideals of national freedom struggle, and the MCQ was these lines are written in which part of the Constitution? Preamble, fundamental rights, DPSP or fundamental duties? The answer was fundamental duties. Therefore, each and every fundamental duty to you should be known. Each and every fundamental duty. So read and remember each and every fundamental duty. Okay. Remember each and every fundamental duty. Memorize. You don't have to memorize word to word. You just have to understand the meaning, but memorize that these are the fundamental duties. You also don't have to memorize whether this duty is subclause A or subclause D. No, just remember that these are fundamental duties. Okay, now very important topic, justiciability of fundamental duties. Now remember, fundamental rights are guaranteed by our constitution to all. Okay, fundamental rights are guaranteed. No executive action, legislative action, judicial action, let's put it this way, no state action shall violate your fundamental right. This makes fundamental rights justiciable. Okay, if your fundamental right is getting violated, you can approach the courts. Simple, yes, provided there is no national emergency, but we have talked about that. Now, the thing is that the next part is DPSP, and it is clearly written in our constitution that DPSPs are non-justiciable. That means if a DPSP is not being fulfilled by the government, you can't approach the courts. The state, the government will take action on DPSP whenever it has the capability. Okay, the constitution makers left it open. When the state has the capacity to implement DPSP, they will do so. If they don't, no citizen can approach the court saying that this DPSP is not being followed. So they are non-justiciable. The same status is given to fundamental duties. Fundamental duties are non-justiciable. So if a citizen is not performing their fundamental duty, the state cannot take action against them just on the basis of this fact that this was the fundamental duty to cherish the noble ideals of freedom fighters and you're not doing so, we'll put you in jail. They can't do it. Fundamental duties are non-justiciable. They are only there to guide the citizens that they should follow these duties, but the state cannot take any action on them. Understood? So they are non-justiciable. Though, do you know, Sardar Swaran Singh actually recommended that these duties should be made justiciable. He said that these are the duties and they should be made justiciable. But the parliamentarians who were passing this Constitutional Amendment Act, they refused, and these duties were made non-justiciable, thank God. You should follow duties, but I mean, if it is justiciable, the state can misuse this against the citizens. Okay, that was the idea. So duties remain moral obligations inspired by Japan's constitution. This is very important. So we got inspiration from USSR's constitution. But Japanese constitution also had fundamental duties. And in Japanese constitution, fundamental duties were also moral, not justiciable. So that is why. But are we not implementing any of the fundamental duties? Well, the courts have made it clear that directly by looking at the constitution, you can't say that this citizen is not following fundamental duties, so put him in jail. Directly, you can't do this. But the parliament or the state legislature can enact a law, which implements fundamental duties. So if a citizen is violating a fundamental duty, then actually he's also violating that law. So he'll be punished according to that, he or she, right? So via law, you can implement fundamental duties, but not otherwise. For example, there is this law called Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act. This is basically implementing this. B, clause B, cherish noble ideals of national freedom struggle, and A also. But mostly it is A, abide by constitution and respect national flag, national anthem. So to implement this, you have passed this law, and through this law, well, now it is justiciable. So each and every fundamental duty can become justiciable through laws, but on their own, they're not justiciable. You understand the difference, okay? And Supreme Court has also made it clear. Supreme Court uses fundamental duties to interpret laws, balance rights with obligations, fundamental rights with fundamental duties, treating them as equal to rights in spirit. They're not justiciable, but courts use them for interpretation of laws, fundamental rights, everything. Make sense? So, in a sense, rights prevail legally, but duties guide policy and statutory validity. Statutory means law's validity. A law's validity, okay? Statute is a law, right? So, duties are used to guide government policy and government law. And the validity of that law is tested by courts using these fundamental duties. So, rights are legally superior, but moral or to act as a guide, fundamental duties are there. I hope you understand this. I hope you have already covered polity, so you understand this, okay? All right. Now, these are some of the landmark cases when it comes to fundamental duties. So they are given in a table. Just go through this. So we'll discuss a few of these cases. For example, AIMS Students Union in AIMS. Basically, AIMS institution gave 33% insider reservation. Okay. Now, the thing is, the courts struck down this 33% reservation for insiders in AIMS. On what basis? The students filed that this reservation, this 33% reservation is unconstitutional. It violates Article 14. But reservations have been justified, saying that Article 14 allows equal protection of laws, right? Equals to be treated equally, unequally. We have discussed this. So reservation, other types of reservations is justified. It is not violative of Article 14. Okay. So how can this reservation is violative of Article 14? So the court said that as per Article 51A, subclause J, this strive for excellence in all spheres for national achievement. The court said that it is everyone's duty to strive for excellence. That means strive for merit. And by giving 33% reservation, you are basically sacrificing merit, which is a violation of a fundamental duty. So in that light, we will say that this reservation is violative of Article 14. You remember, courts use fundamental duties to interpret fundamental rights also. You understand? So Article 51A sub clause J was used to interpret Article 14. Interpret what? That this reservation is unconstitutional. You understand how fundamental duties are used? So this is how. And there are many more examples, but I discussed this example to give you an idea. Okay. Plus, I told you that fundamental duties can be implemented through laws. So one law we have discussed, Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act. You cannot disrespect the flag. You cannot disrespect national emblems. So this is given. Okay. Then other fundamental duties are implemented via other laws. There is a table in your notes which explains those laws. Those laws are given which implement a specific fundamental duty. So do go through that. All right. Simple. So this is all you need to know as far as fundamental duties are concerned. But now let's talk about the reason why we are discussing fundamental duties. And the reason was this case, Durga Dutt versus Union of India case. Durga Dutt was basically the petitioner who filed a public interest litigation in the Honorable Supreme Court, okay, in 2021-22, saying that we need to implement fundamental duties. Fundamental duties are non-justiciable. This is wrong. Implement fundamental duties. So this was Durga Dutt's argument that partially make fundamental duties justiciable. Now the courts admitted this PIL and asked the government to give a reply. So the government gave a reply in 2025 recently, that is September. That is why this was in the news, and that is why we are discussing fundamental duties. Okay. So what was the case all about? So let's talk about the key arguments. So what is the petitioner's claim? What is Durga Dutt's claim? He says that violations of duties like road blockages during protests infringe others' rights under Article 14, which is equality, that you have the right to express yourself, but you can't violate my right to access this road. Okay. So it violates Article 14. It violates my freedoms to move freely in India and my right to life also, because I can't go to work. So because of your inability to perform your fundamental duties, you are blocking the roads because of your protest and my rights are getting violated. He argued this, Durga Dutt. The petitioner claims, or he requests, a high-powered committee should be created which creates rules for adherence and implementation of Ranganath Mishra direction and Verma committee recommendations. Verma committee basically said that fundamental duties should be made part of school curriculum, college curriculum. More awareness should be generated so that more and more people follow fundamental duties. Okay. So he said that a high-powered committee, he basically demanded from the Supreme Court that please create a high-powered committee which would recommend how to implement Verma committee's recommendations. Now, government gave a reply. The Attorney General gave a reply in 2025. He said that duty is non-justiciable in nature, executive domain for implementation via legislation or schemes. Duties are non-justiciable, but we can implement duties if there is a law or we have created a scheme. Judiciary aids interpretation but cannot mandate laws. The government has said that judiciary can use fundamental duties to interpret other fundamental rights, other laws. But judiciary cannot say that these fundamental duties are justiciable and direct us to pass a law. It is not your domain. It is our domain. It is not judiciary's domain. Judiciary's job is only interpretation. Judiciary cannot direct us to create a law to implement fundamental duties. So this was the government's reply. Okay. Now, what was the court's response? The courts noted relevance but refused to direct legislation. The court said that yes, Durga Dutt-ji, you are right, but we can't direct the government to pass a law to implement this. Okay. They stressed that yes, citizens' consciousness should be increased with respect to fundamental duties, and there are existing laws that embody fundamental duties, but we can't direct the parliament or the prime minister to make this justiciable. Okay, they will pass laws, it is their decision. Now the case is pending still. Okay, next hearing is awaited, and chances are that in the next hearing also courts won't change their stand, but let's see what happens. Okay, so the whole debate is about justiciability and non-justiciability, so remember this. Okay, and that would be all. With that, we conclude today's session. So thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'm sure it has added value to your preparation, but it would add more value if you memorize the lecture from the notes, you ask your doubts, and you give the tests on time. So with the hope that you're going to precisely do that, I shall take your leave with the promise of seeing you again with another topic in this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay. Thank you, everyone.